able to just press um, uh, the presentation. So thank you everyone for joining. This is a presentation where I'm going to offer you an insight to performance empowerment skills that we've been drawing on from work and research in elite sport, and also from research taking it to business. And so, as I say, my work is very varied. It could be in the field with the national team I support. It could be one-to-ones, group calls, Zoom calls. And in this varied work, I get to experience and witness some amazing things. And I'd like you to use your imagination to begin with, because you're probably all sitting. And as you're sitting there, what I'd like you to do is bring your legs together and imagine that they're strapped together, and that your legs are then encased in a big black carbon fiber shell, and that the chair that you're on is a metal rig that has a shock absorber, and then you're sitting on one single downhill ski, and then you're transported to the top of a mountain, and it's the World Cup downhill run in San Moritz. And this is your training run before you do the World Cup the next day. And this is what happened to this athlete. He's a sit skiing. He's probably hitting around about 100 kilometers an hour right there. He slows down a little, picks up speed again, hits the soft snow, crash. How do you get yourself ready to perform the next day? This was the training run. And then the next day, this phenomenal athlete actually achieved second place in the World Cup event. And he was able to deal with this difficult experience and perform well when it mattered. You might be thinking, well, why do I share this with you? It's because this ability to overcome difficult experience, to overcome your own self-limiting barriers and perform well in the moments that matter, can be learned. And this phenomenal athletes develop those skills. And the research I've done has shown that drawing from a framework of mental skills can offer you this performance empowerment and improve your sense of well-being too. But what we tend to do is that we wait until the problem's arisen. We have this thing in psychology, we often have to be parachuted in to fix problems. And I'm just offering, see if you can offer yourself a new approach, that you learn the skills that you need for a challenging performance event before the challenging performance event. And this is because high performance situations and environments, they do involve heightened stress responses, sense of pressure. There's difficulties and demands. And in those situations, we tend to revert to our conditioning, our psychological, physiological, behavioral conditioning. Things like thinking patterns and emotional responses, physiological changes, habits and behaviors, actions that we do. And the question to ask yourself right now is, are these being beneficial or detrimental for your performance? Now, if they're being detrimental, I would ask you, you can do something about that. Now, the next question might be, well, where do I start? Well, what I offer is a framework of mental skills learning, where you can develop a broad range of skills to manage things like thoughts, emotions, physiological reactions, and behaviors. And I put this together over, it's like 8 years of research, lots of major university studies. And we start with what I call the 4 A's. And these are the skills of developing awareness, being able to manage attention, a helpful attitude response, and skillful action. Skillful action is where you're able to begin to choose responses in a given situation. And these 4 A's are the foundational core to being able to choose and activate powerful mechanisms of change. And these mechanisms of change are actually very strongly evidence-based in research. And if you activate these repeatedly over time, beneficial change for performance and well-being begins to happen. And my research I've done has actually shown that they have a ripple effect, that they begin to influence each other. So the aim of this presentation is to give you some insight to these, how they can be helpful for you, and just some takeaways. Can't go into depth in this short presentation, but some takeaways how you can use them in your life and in business to perform better and improve your sense of well-being. So let's begin with awareness. So when I'm helping people to build and develop awareness, self-awareness, I start with context. This is because your context influences and drives your reactions and conditioned responses. Well, what do I mean by context? Well, consider, waking up tired in the morning. And what that's going to do, it's going to start influencing what's going on in your mind, in your body, and the types of actions that you have. So just take for a moment and consider how being tired is going to influence things like your thoughts, in contrast to being full of energy. So your thoughts may be a little bit more inclined to the negative. The types of mental stories they have, the type of self-talk or inner chatter you offer yourself. It will influence your focus of attention, how you perceive yourself, others, and how you perceive your environment. We tend to, in these types of contexts, we may have a little bit more of a negative bias. The types of feelings you have when you're tired, you might feel more inclined to being sad or low. The physical sensations, you feel a bit lethargic, not wanting to exercise and things. And these can become habits. A lot of people say to me, for example, when they're tired, that they're just irritable and grumpy. And a lot of the athletes I work with will say to me that I can't perform to the same level when I'm tired. What I'm offering you is that these are conditioned responses, and they get stronger with repetition. And that being tired doesn't necessarily mean that you have to think negatively, feel sad or low, or be irritable. And it's understanding that other contexts can get involved as well. So, like another internal context is feeling a stress response going on, a sense of that there's some pressure upon you, heightened emotions. Even external context features like the weather. We all know that when we pull open the curtains, for example, oh my God, look at the weather, it's awful. Boom, starts influencing your mind, your body, and actions. Even things like certain events, competitions, big business meetings, certain people, for example, it could be that a global boss is coming over and like, oh my God, it's going to start influencing mind, body, and actions. Environments where you're actually presenting or doing something in business. But with awareness, you can start to challenge these conditioned responses. You can actually start to make them weaker, and it offers an opportunity for change. And I love this phrase by Carl Jung that says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will dictate your life and you will call it fate. And this is so true, is that our context tend to drive these things automatically until we start building the skill of tuning into it and asking yourself, what are my mind, body, action responses? How are they serving me? Are they being functional or dysfunctional? So what I help people with is develop what I call self-awareness check-ins. So you're priming yourself to know that these mind, body, action responses might start to kick in. So how do you do that? Well, you can check in when you first wake up. Have I had a good night's sleep and feel full of energy, or am I just, ugh? Okay, well, that might affect me. What about the first interactions you have with people? Just checking in before, taking a breath. Okay, I might need to put a little bit more energy into this. Changing tasks that you're doing at work, changing locations are good times to kind of check in. Just say, okay, what's going on with me right now? Before important meetings or events. I'll give you an example. There was a CEO that I worked with who explained that when he was tired, that he was just, I'm just irritable and grumpy. And what he did through his little check-ins was he noticed that in the morning, his children and wife, if he was tired, his children and wife ignored him. His employees stayed away because they knew those days not to approach him. That in those days, he was less likely to do exercise and people wouldn't challenge him in meetings. So through this process of checking in and recognizing these responses, he was able to begin changing. And so this knowledge and awareness to your conditioned responses and reactions begins to offer this ability to change. And the changes don't seem much initially, but each recognition and shift in response is what I call a 1%. They add up over time. They begin to accumulate. They don't initially hit you like, oh, I've made a great big change, but they begin to change your conditioned responses over time. This can be hugely impactful for performance and well-being. But of course, change needs repetition. So it's about doing this again and again. Managing attention. Well, managing attention begins with awareness to attention. I'm going to invite you to do a little 10-second exercise right here. And just inviting you to close your eyes. And for 10 seconds, I just want you to notice, if you can, the content of your mind. What pops in? Are you ready? We'll just do 10 seconds. Ready? Let's go. Okay, that was 10 seconds right there. Congratulations, you've just developed your skills of awareness to attention. And would any of you like to share in the chat what you noticed in that 10 seconds? Anyway, just pop in. Did you notice a certain thought? Something that came up? I can share with what came up with me was that I instantly the thought came in to say, "Oh, what's going on with this? Oh, here we go. We got so many busy thoughts today. Grasshopper thinking, right? There's in 10 seconds, lots of busy thoughts. My brain instantly went to, oh, I hope this presentation works out, Stu. Don't make a mistake. Don't make a mistake. It was there, right? And this could be so important, right? That grasshopper thinking, I love that kind of term, is that was just 10 seconds. But how much do you reckon? Oh, here we go. How much of your day as a percentage do you think the average person spends in this mind wandering? Well, what we know from research is it's around about 47%. That's about half of your day. Now, we had somebody there said they had busy thoughts. Now, the content of that thought might be, as I say, I had thought, oh, I hope this presentation works out. And if you can think about it like that, if you were half of your day that you're drifting into that type of mind wandering content, it may be functional for you, but it also might be very dysfunctional for you. And it's recognizing also that in that mind wandering, your context is going to influence not only your attention, but the content of that mind wandering. So when you daydream and you mind wander, we know from your own experience, you know that you can have a lovely daydream and we get reactions. You can have your mind can wander to something catastrophic and you're going to get reactions. And this is what happens in this mind wandering a lot of the time, that we get mental, emotional, physical reactions. Now, it's understanding that there are two major drivers to the intensity of these reactions. And that's how long you stay in that mind wandering content and how often your mind wanders to that content. Now, if it's functional content, fine, stay there. But if it's dysfunctional content, it could be creating conditioned responses because you're doing it again and again and again and again. This is why I get people, especially in high performance situations, to begin to check in to the content of their mind wandering. And it's understanding and accepting that mind wandering is a completely healthy human function. The issue arises around the content of your mind wandering. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, how do I control my attention? Well, I'm going to burst that bubble right there because you can't. It's accepting that your mind will wander. But what you can do is learn to manage your attention. And again, in this little, just invite you to do a little exercise here, 20 seconds. And all I'm going to ask you to do is right now, I would like you to find in the room that you are, see if you can find something that you've never seen in that room before. It could be a crack in the ceiling or an object that you were, oh, I haven't seen that in ages. And you might notice a little thought comes into your mind about that thing or whatever, and then just guide your attention to, okay, let's just be curious, see if I can find something. Great. Again, okay, in 20 seconds there, what you've been doing is beginning to manage your attention, noticing thought content, guiding to a task, one thing. And this is the skill. You can't control your attention, but what you can do is you manage it. You can notice the mind wandering. Say to yourself, what is it? What's going on right now? Is it functional? Is it dysfunctional? If it's dysfunctional mind content, I'm going to return my attention to one thing. And what you're doing is you're spending less time and frequency in that dysfunctional content. Now, we did that in that exercise, being curious to something in your room. But you can guide your attention to one thing in the present moment, curious to your experience. It could be an object. It could be the coffee mug in front of you or the glass that's in front of you, a pen. It doesn't really matter. For the athletes that I work with, this is where performance routines are so important because their minds are going to wander to horrible, catastrophic things. But they're able to focus their attention on their warm-up, their mobility, their preparation, just that one thing. In mindful meditation, you practice doing this by bringing your attention to the body and breath. But it doesn't have to be present moment. You can deliberately and consciously reflect on an experience that you enjoyed, had delight in, performed well in, or project a future experience of fun, excitement, performing well. The thing here is you're just putting your attention to one thing that is more functional in that moment. And I call this going from big picture thinking to small picture thinking. We've all felt that feeling of overwhelm in performance moments where we're going, what if this happens? What if this happens? And oh my God, like the last time this didn't go so well. And there's lots of things going on in the mind. You're just saying, okay, what can I do here? What do I need in this moment right now? The one thing. That's what I'm going to put my attention to. And this can be so helpful for performance, not only performance, but well-being over time. A helpful attitude response. Well, it's understanding that attitudes that you have to experiences are conditioned responses too. We tend to pair attitudes to certain experiences that influence reactions. If I was to put a big pile of work in front of you right now and say that has to be done by tomorrow, you'd probably, oh man, that sucks. That's the worst thing ever. Can't stand that. That's horrible. You get home and nobody's unpacked the dishwasher. You're like, what? Really? I've got to do that thing, man. That sucks. I've got to do this and whatever. And your attitude to these things is creating reactions. And those attitudes can be hugely influenced by your context. Your attitude to doing the dishwasher, emptying the dishwasher, for example, is totally different to when you're feeling tired and stressed as to feeling kind of full of energy. So the skill I help people with is to start recognizing what attitude am I bringing to certain tasks and experiences. Is it a helpful or unhelpful attitude? In Buddhist psychology, they talk about the two arrows of suffering. If I was to shoot you with one arrow, would that be painful? You're probably thinking, well, yeah. If I was to shoot you with another arrow, would that be even more painful? Well, yeah. And what they talk about is the first, in life, often the first arrow can't be avoided. But the second arrow is your reaction to the first. It's your attitude. You're wishing things to be different. And it's understanding also that in high performance and also in life, some situations just suck. They are unpleasant. But the degree of unpleasantness and the reaction you get is influenced by your attitude to it. So the skill I help people with is to notice their attitude. Start tuning in, checking in, going, what attitude am I bringing? And then as best you can, guiding yourself to a more helpful attitude response. Just saying to yourself, you know what, this experience sucks, but that's okay. I can get through this. I don't need to make this any worse. What this does is starts to change your relationship to experience, especially difficult experience. It changes your conditioned attitudes over time. And it has the power to change your reactions within certain experience, especially difficult experience. And that can lead to a lot of performance benefits, better well-being. So the skillful action piece, as you can imagine, is we're pulling upon these skills of awareness, managing attention, and the helpful attitude response. Why would you want to learn and activate the mechanisms of change? Well, there's a difference between high performance and normal everyday performance. Imagine high performance is something that's important to us. If we have personal motivation behind the thing, that we might be, there might be some risk physical risk or self-esteem risk involved. Your skills and abilities are being tested, perhaps evaluated, even measured against others. And in these situations, what happens is the brain starts getting involved. And your brain is a predicting and guessing machine. It's going to say, what do I need for this experience? It's going to offer you, for example, things that can go wrong. It can also offer you successfully doing the performance, for example. But which one do you think the brain has a natural, stronger neural connectivity for? Well, tends to be a negative bias. That or your brain is designed to keep you safe, not to keep you happy. So constantly going to the dysfunctional thinking can become a conditioned response, and that influences your reactions. Now, in normal everyday performance, those conditioned responses may not have meaningful impact. The thought of things going wrong when you're just doing a presentation to your colleagues that you do every day, well, it might not have meaningful impact. It might not actually make a difference. And this is one of the reasons that we don't learn to change, because we can get by. We just can do it. But in high performance situation, elevated stress responses, sense of pressure, difficult emotions, demands, physiological demands and stuff like this, being able to manage these conditioned responses can be the difference that sets apart top performers. It can pivot you to either a poor performance, failing, just surviving, but if you can manage your conditioned responses, you're more likely to achieve, have success, and have a sense of thriving. So let's go into some of these mechanisms of change then. Well, one of the ones I help people with is reflection. This is where you're updating the brain to give it new information for the next experience. So consider if you've got a performance event that's coming up in the future, the near future. What your brain starts getting involved in is, what do I need for this new experience? What your brain's going to start to do is going to trawl through fragments of past experience that it thinks best fit this new experience. And from this, reactions emerge. The types of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and impulses you're having. And this is important because it's important to realize that every experience that you have, especially important experiences, your brain is automatically going to process and give meaning to. And that we know that the brain has a bit of a negative bias. So if you don't consciously reflect, without conscious reflection, you might drift into this automatic bias, where your brain processes and gives meaning to you feeling anxious in that performance experience. Oh, I could have done better. All of the doubts, focus on the mistakes, focus on the difficult context that you were experiencing, the negative, the perception of others that you had in that situation where people thought, oh, they didn't think I did very well. And that becomes your memory of that experience. But if you'd reflected on that performance experience with conscious reflection, you may be able to guide yourself to what you did well and how you did it, the skills, abilities, and strengths that you used in action in that performance experience. It was difficult, but you were able to overcome it. How you were maybe had the inner quality of being resilient. And this is the skill I ask people to do, is that after an important meeting, a presentation, anything that has some importance to you, is take the time, reflect, write down these things and sort of say, how did you get through it? What did you do well? How did you do it? Because this has the power to change your reactions for the next high performance moments, helping you to perform better and helping well-being over time as well. And when I start work with people, one of the things that commonly comes up, you say, Stu, I want to feel more confident. So I ask them, well, what is confidence? And they find it very hard to put their finger on it because it's a very, very broad term. So where do you even start? So what I help them with is guiding them to the origins of the word. And it comes from the Latin confidere, con meaning with, fidere meaning trust, with trust. And it leads you to a stronger and much more evidence-based term, much more research term called self-efficacy. This is where you have belief or trust in your abilities. It's belief that you can use your abilities in a given situation to a certain performance level. So right now, if you were to recall a performance experience that you did well. It was a good performance experience. I could probably lay a safe bet that your focus would probably go to the outcome because it felt good. Maybe you had a sense of, oh, I nailed it. That was awesome. I did really well. You maybe drawn to the perception that others offered you, that maybe some applause or some positive feedback afterwards, and that can be helpful. But what is perhaps more important for building belief and trust in abilities, we know, is how you reflect on the experience can influence belief. So rather than bringing your focus to the outcome, I ask people to think of what did I do and how did I do it that led to that outcome. The skills, abilities, strengths that I used, the inner qualities that I had to draw upon. The reason for that, these are manageable, or they're certainly more controllable in those performance situations. Because can you actually control the outcome going into a performance situation? Well, no. But this is what we do. We tend to bring a reflective focus to the outcome. And over time, if we're always focusing on the outcome, that's where our attention tends to go. And it brings our attention to being on the uncontrollables. So the skill is to build belief in your abilities is when you've had that performance experience, replay the what and how in detail. This builds belief in your abilities. It means for the next performance experience, your brain prediction has better and updated information to recall, which can be way better for performance, hugely impactful for well-being. Decentering and disidentifying. What does that mean? Well, it's where you're impartially observing your experience. Now, I'm guessing that all of you at some point, when you maybe got a performance experience coming up in the future, as we get caught up in thinking about that performance event before it's even happened. We get the grasshopper mind that somebody explained, just that busy mind, that racing mind. We're involved in projections of what we think it's going to be, or going past experiences of things maybe not working out. And we call this mental time travel. Just your brain is going future past, ruminating over these things. And these simulations can seem very real. And because they seem real to the brain can begin to offer you real life reactions. And we know this from science, from fMRI imaging brain studies, is that this type of mental time travel can increase brain activity in the emotional areas of the brain and self-processing areas of the brain, which, when it comes to performance moments, can be dysfunctional for us. So the skill is to begin tuning in and checking in, just saying to yourself, observing that thought content, maybe even describing your experience to yourself. So you can check in with awareness to what's going on in the mind, what's going on in the body, what behaviors you're doing. And there's another little element here which you might notice, because what I do as a tip to help people is I describe these things in the second person. So it'd be like, okay, Stu, you're having a thought that this presentation might not work out very well. That's okay. That's just a thought. You're feeling a bit nervous, and you can feel that in the tummy. I'm having the sensation of butterflies in the tummy, and you're wanting to speed up and be a bit quicker with your communication. So I know that I can just slow down. I can just observe and describe that experience. Now, you might think that that's insignificant, but what you're actually doing is you're using different brain activity. That speaking to yourself in the second person, you're disidentifying from that experience. It uses less emotional areas of the brain. You increase what we call the regulation areas, the cortex areas of the brain, and offers a shift in perspective so that you're not in these real life, feeling as if you're in these real life reactions as much. Reappraisal. Well, this is where you're reevaluating your experience from the automatic input that your brain has given you. And it's in high performance moments, it is really easy to discover to drift into conditioned responses to your habitual thinking patterns, emotional responses, physiological changes in habits and behaviors, for example. So the skill is being able to notice these conditioned responses. So let's take thoughts, for example, and it's just noticing these things and asking yourself, are these being functional or dysfunctional? So let's take thoughts, for example, and ask yourself right now in this moment, are your thoughts always relevant? Are they always accurate? Your thoughts always represent reality? Are they always a true reflection of you? Are they always a correct guide for your actions? And I'm hoping in this moment right now, you're probably saying, no, of course they don't. But we know that in certain contexts, high performance moments, for example, that our thoughts can seem very real and true and accurate. You can't do this. The reappraisal is when you begin to notice that, you can begin to challenge thoughts and go, okay, I can see why you're saying I can't do this, but you know what? I can. And as you begin to do this, begin to notice the moments where those irrelevant, inaccurate, untrue thoughts start to come in. And I call it the thinking monsters. And what I do is I tune in to help people to tune into, well, when do your thinking monsters arrive? For me, for example, I know that it's late at night, first thing in the morning. So if I know that late at night, first thing in the morning, I tend to have, that's when my thought monsters arrive. I've just developed, I have a non-negotiable. I just don't believe them. I'm able to challenge them and just say, I know why you're there. It's because it's late, it's tired. I've got this important thing tomorrow. I don't believe them. In that sense of reappraisal, then you can also draw on your self-efficacy. When your brain's saying you can't do it, you're able to reappraise and reevaluate from that automatic input and go, well, you know what? I can. You can offer yourself that supportive self-talk to say, you know what? Actually, I'm going to do this and I know I can do this. What about empathy? Well, empathy, like compassion, as we'll talk about later, begins with self. And it's about acknowledging and understanding and validating your experience. And when it comes to emotions, for example, we tend to be very quick at labeling emotions as negative and positive. We do it a lot. We read about it a lot. Negative emotions, positive emotions. But the thing about emotions aren't as binary as that. And emotions are hugely complex. And what I offer you is that there's no such thing as a negative emotion. Emotions are just signals that give you information. Sadness, for example, is just information that you've experienced loss. It might be a signal to reflect on that moment. That it might be a signal to others that you need comfort. Anger is when shows you that someone is acting in a way outside of your values. It's a signal to other people to maybe to back off. Guilt could be that you've acted in a way outside of your values. The thing about emotions is that they can be functional or dysfunctional in certain moments. But if we understand them, it is very much more helpful. And it's understanding also that you can't immediately change an emotion, but what you can do is immediately change your relationship to it. So the skill is in building up to high performance moments is to do those kind of awareness check-ins, to just saying what's going on right now. Saying to yourself, okay, I'm having these thoughts, these feelings and sensations, and they're here because this is important to me. This means something to me. And this empathy that you're bringing yourself, this sense of understanding allows you to start befriending that experience. Feeling anxious? Well, I'm feeling anxious because this means something to me. What this does is it offers you a sense of empowerment within difficult emotions. Allows you to say to yourself, you know what, I am experiencing this, but I want to do this. I'm willing to do this, even though this is difficult. And when you start doing that, it can be hugely beneficial for performance and again, over time for well-being too. An approach orientation. This is where we begin to turn towards difficult experience. What if right now a big spider like that was to come into the room that you're in? And for most of you, I'm guessing that it would be avoid, avoid, avoid. And I actually had an experience when I was exposed to a big spider like that. I was visiting my brother in Australia, and I was helping him around the garden. I was brushing some things away by some brickwork, and there was a little air vent, and I brushed it, and a big huntsman spider came out. I was quicker than Usain Bolt over 10 meters. I was off. And what I noticed is that that experience stayed with me. And when I came home to the UK, I was in the bathroom and I noticed a little spider, and I instantly began getting caught up in my experience. I was thinking, "Oh my God, that's going to be a poisonous spider." That's even if it's just a little spider. Mummy and Daddy spider behind the wall, they'll come out. I started getting anxious. My heart rate changed. My breathing rate changed. I had the impulse and urge to get outside the bathroom. And these are the things that make up your experience. These are the things that condition us to avoid. Why? Because they're unpleasant. They don't feel good. But what is the cost of avoidance? Well, if I was to avoid that experience all of the time, my tolerance to spiders and things like that being in the room would get lower and lower and lower. My perception of control in that experience would start getting less. My belief and abilities of being able to deal with that situation would get lower and lower and lower. No, I'm not saying that you should approach spiders. I'm just using it as a metaphorical example. But the skill is to start learning to approach, to build your threshold for dealing with uncomfortableness, offering yourself resilience. Now, in helping people, we don't jump into the big things straight off. We deal with the little things first. Could be, for example, you just have a difficult conversation you've got to have with somebody. And what you can do is you can tune in and check in with awareness to the types of thoughts, emotions, sensations, and impulses and urges that are around, and noticing that they feel uncomfortable and unpleasant. And just saying to yourself, you know what? I'm willing to turn towards this and do this thing. And recognizing that being with this uncomfortableness is actually building your tolerance to it. So it's worth facing up to this. And then reflect, update the brain, give it the new information that says, actually, turning towards this difficult thing was worth it. Didn't feel good at the moment. It made me feel better afterwards, made me feel good about myself after turning up to dealing with that thing. Equanimity. This is where we are able to offer ourselves composure within difficult experience. We all experience moments where we're agitated, stressed, and like stress reaction going on. We're going to stay calm, stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. And what's happening in these moments is you've got an elevated stress response, heightened emotional states, difficult physical sensations, for example. And one way that I guide people to offering themselves a bit of composure within difficult experience, over and above, or not over and above, but also mindfulness meditation is strongly linked with equanimity, for example. But one way I guide people is to understand that every breath that you're taking, how you're moving, and what you're doing with your eyesight is all sending signals to the brain. And the skill that we develop with awareness is to notice those moments when we're caught up. We've all been involved in this situation. We're like, oh my God, I'm in a rush. I need to rush. I need to go. And it's just saying to yourself, noticing that moment. And just saying to yourself, pause. What's going on? Well, I'm running late. Okay, that's okay. I don't need to rush right here. Breathe slowly. Offer yourself a long exhale or a longer exhale than inhale. Move slowly. By moving slowly, you're sending a signal to the brain that says, this isn't a threatening situation. I don't need this elevated stress response. The breathing slowly is doing the same thing. View slowly and view wide. What do I mean by that? Well, when we're in heightened stress responses, our focus of our focus of attention tends to narrow. Our eyesight narrows. You'll see pictures of animals and in those programs on the TV where if they're feeling under threat, that they'll move and jerk the head from side to side. That's because their vision has narrowed, and it's sending a signal to the brain to say threat, threat, threat. We can overcome this by just allowing yourself look to the horizon, look to the edges of the room, pause, breathe slowly, move slowly, and view wide. And I love this phrase, the effect you expect is the effect you get. If you don't believe that you can be composed within difficult experience, well, you're less likely to be able to do so. There was a lovely study that showed by even just saying to yourself, I can regulate emotions, had a much stronger, showed much stronger significance of being able to do that. So say to yourself, I can do this. And then reflect. Compassionate responding. Well, this is where we offer ourselves support in taking action. Compassion is a very, very, very misunderstood term. In research, we now know that compassion is the sensitivity to the suffering of self and others with a motivation and commitment to relieve and prevent it. Now, there are many, many aspects to compassion that I can't go into in this, so let's just address one. Consider, whose voice do you hear most in your life? Well, with a little bit of thinking, you'll probably come to the conclusion, well, it's actually my own. And that it's understanding that your mind is your constant companion in life. And when it offers you things, you can hate it and beat yourself up. And that become, you hate your mind content, and you're harsh and horrible to it and toxic, for example, or you can learn to befriend it. See it as your companion through life. And the skill of compassionate responding is begin to notice how you're responding to yourself. Not just asking yourself the question, what does this moment need? And again, starting with the little things. What do you do when you spill a coffee cup? Oh, you loser, you idiot. Oh, you're horrible. It's noticing that and being able to begin a different response and say, you know what? It's a cup of coffee. I can clean this up. It's not an issue. You make mistakes. Idiot, blah, blah, blah. Those types of things. Again, notice, okay, made a mistake. What do I need to do? I can learn from this. I can grow from this. How would you respond to a friend in those situations? What action can you take that's going to support you in those situations? Now, in high performance, with all of those things going on, stress, sense of pressure, the difficulties and demands, it's understanding that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail sometimes. You're going to experience disappointment and frustration. And your compassionate response is a way to help you manage reactions. It's a way of helping you to thrive, not only improve performance, to get a sense of thriving. What has this all led to through the research that I've been able to do? Well, what it's led to is people feeling more psychologically empowered. They have a greater sense of meaning. They're able to live more in alignment with the things that are important to them. They have purpose, direction, that they feel more competent, that they actually have a greater sense that they have a belief in their abilities. They feel more self-determined, that they actually have autonomy to be able to choose what they want to do, that they have more impact in their life, in their business life as well. Of course, they develop self-awareness, but also, important elements like an improved understanding of themselves, an enhanced self-concept where they actually think more positively about themselves. They develop more resilience to that build-up, those difficult build-ups before performance events, during the performance event, and also afterwards. They're more resilient to themselves and their own inner demons that the brain was going to offer you. They're able to have more self-regulation. They have improved regulation of thoughts, emotions, sensations, habits, and actions, which means they can manage reactions. They describe having better emotional intelligence, so that they have improved interpersonal skills and awareness, and not only a better understanding of their own emotions, but others too. And they describe being able to perform under pressure better. So they're less affected by performance pressure and more capable to thrive under that pressure. This program of training, I call the Monroe Performance Empowerment Program. If you do wish to have more details about this, feel free to contact me. And if we end the recording now, Katie, that would be